All right, good morning, everyone. We're just gonna give it a few minutes as people start to populate into our webinar. So thank you all for joining us this morning. I'm just gonna go over a couple of housekeeping items as we kind of all settle in. First of all, I wanna let you know that we are recording today's webinar and we'll be emailing out that recording to all of our attendees, as well as posting it on the COVID-19 resource page of the Morrison-Garrattano website. There'll also be time at the end of today's presentation for a live Q&A. So feel free to post your questions anytime throughout the presentation using that Q&A box. We ask that you don't use the chat feature for questions because our presenters won't be monitoring that area, but just pop them into that Q&A section. And with that, I think we're pretty set to go. We have Morrison-Garrattano's HR Director, Angela Toomey, to get us started. So I'll hand it over to her.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. It would be an understatement to say that the last few months have been a little stressful. We've all had to adjust our daily lives to replace the expected with new beginnings, whether that's working from home, balancing being a teacher and a parent, or adjusting plans for the future of your business. So as your trusted advisor, Morrison-Garrattano wanted to reach a little bit further than insurance today and provide you with something that might also help with your well-being. We are very excited to have Jennifer Porcher and Lynn Bittinger of Unlock Potential here today to teach us about mindfulness and how we can find some calm amid the chaos. Unlock Potential is a leadership development firm here in SLO that provides training and coaching and development to strong leaders, teams, and culture. Jennifer Porcher has spent 18 years consulting and training with more than 300 small to medium-sized businesses. Her passion is creating and leading training programs that improve communication, management performance, and overall company culture. Lynn Bittinger is an entrepreneur, a business coach, a mindfulness and leadership trainer with over 25 years experience as a designer and a brand strategist. Her focus is to learn what makes people tick and then use that insight to help people and businesses grow into greater versions of themselves. We are honored to have Jennifer and Lynn here with us today. So with that, I will hand it over to them.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for being with us here today. And Angela, thank you for that nice introduction. Some of you probably know a little bit or maybe even a lot about mindfulness, and some of you might not know anything. But we have designed this training to really be perfect for any amount of information you know or have. And our real goal for today was, like Morrison-Garrattano, we care so much about what's happening right now in the lives of everyone with everything going on in the world around us. And we just want to be able to offer some peace and joy and give you guys some tools to manage that anxiety and that stress. And I think it's really important that we do recognize that we have been getting one gut punch after another. And whether it's that change to our professional situation or maybe the demands from our family, we definitely have a ton of emotion that we're trying to manage around all this social unrest. It could be financial. It could just be that we are in times of uncertainty, maybe fear of an illness, or even just a change in our daily routine. But anytime we have emotional unrest, it actually brings unrest to our minds and it hinders our ability to function at our best. So today we want to give you some tools to help you work through this. And Lynn and I personally have found over the years that these tools benefit us greatly. And if we practice regularly and maybe even multiple times in the day, we can feel the benefits of being more mindful and present. And so thank you again for joining us. And I hope that today we can give you guys some tools that you'll be able to adopt and hopefully integrate into your own lives. So with that, we'll get started.
Well, hello, everybody. Like Jennifer said, we're both really excited to be sharing this information about mindfulness with you today. It's a very important time for all of us to be practicing. So we're super excited to be sharing this with you. So let's start from the very beginning. What exactly is mindfulness? So while there doesn't seem to be one universally accepted definition of mindfulness, the general understanding is that mindfulness is a non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. So mindfulness can be considered a way of being, and it's supported by many practices to help you observe your thoughts, your emotions, and sensations without judging them as good or bad. And I think probably most of us could know and understand it's not that easy to do this, right? So this is why it's called mindfulness practice, because these are not things that are easy for most of us to do. So mindfulness practices allow us to carefully pay attention to the way our minds create and alleviate stress in our bodies. So the way our minds create and alleviate anxiety and stress in our bodies. So the better that we get at becoming aware of these patterns of our minds, the better we get at managing them in useful, constructive ways. And the better we get at that, the better we feel, and we have more sense of peace and balance in our lives. And that really is the main goal of all mindfulness practices. So just to give you a quick personal example, Jennifer said that we use these practices in our lives all the time, and we do. And here's just a quick example of what's happened to me a few times throughout this COVID period of time we've been in. So a few times I have found myself lying in bed and my mind starts getting active and thinking, oh my gosh, what if I have COVID and I don't know it, I'm asymptomatic, and maybe I'm spreading it to my mother-in-law who's 85 and I see her once a week, or maybe I saw Molly and Carrie and maybe I accidentally spread it to them, and maybe I shouldn't have gone to Costco and I shouldn't have gone to Trader Joe's, and maybe I didn't wash my hands after I went to Home Depot. And you can start seeing the mind, right? I can start seeing the crazy making happening, right? Oh my gosh, this worry, this anxiety. And one of the practices that I have learned over the years, and this is what we hope to share with you today, one of the key aspects of mindfulness is to become aware of yourself in real time when you start seeing your mind going in a loop, a spinning loop that's not productive for you. So when this happens to me while I'm trying to fall asleep and I see this start activating in my mind, I stop and I realize, wow, okay, my mind's getting busy. My mind's getting busy in ways that aren't making my body feel good. So what can I do? So one of the practices there's so many practices, but one of the practices we use is called naming, just simply naming. So when we feel an anxiety or something going on in our body, some sensation in our body that we are, it's feeling uncomfortable, we can simply name it. Or it's called name it to tame it, right? So in this case, for me, the sensation that's coming up is anxiety. I'm anxious. I'm anxious about maybe getting somebody sick. And I'm feeling bad and ruminating about what I may have done in the past that might be causing me to harm people in the future, right? So here I am lying in bed, but I'm thinking about things from the past and the future. So what I do is I just name it. And when those thoughts and sensations come up, I just literally quietly say to myself, anxiety. That's anxiety. There it is again, anxiety. And the sensation, this feeling in my body, it starts to slowly lose its grip on me. And it's almost as if I can see this anxiety as a cloud outside of me, and I'm looking at it and I'm noticing it and I'm pointing to it lovingly, gently. I'm not rejecting it. I'm just noticing anxiety. Here's anxiety again. Here's anxiety again. That's okay. And as I separate myself in my mind, actually different circuitries now running in my brain, because this naming it is a different circuit than this anxiety that I'm feeling. So just by beginning to name it, it starts to lose its charge. So that's just a quick little example to show you how there are so many practices that you can use in everyday ways that can help us in real time begin to drop that stress and anxiety that we might be feeling in any given moment. So some of you guys know a lot about mindfulness, and also a lot of people have some misconceptions about mindfulness. So whether you know a lot or a little, we're just going to go over a few things that a lot of people tend to have some misconceptions about mindfulness. So what is mindfulness not? So mindfulness is not a meditation practice, right? So a lot of people just think mindfulness is meditation. Now, to be clear, meditation is a very primary practice in mindfulness practice, but it's just not the only one. So just as I showed you before, this naming it, that's a mindfulness practice, but it's not necessarily meditation, what we would consider a meditation. It's also not about emptying your mind of thoughts. So again, while many practices, meditation practices do have us try to calm the monkey mind and focus on something besides our thoughts, it's not one and the same with mindfulness. It's also not Buddhism or religious practice. So while many of the concepts and some of the practices did derive from Buddhism and other wisdom traditions, this is not the same. It's not one and the same. Buddhism does not equal mindfulness. It's not also about doing things slowly. Again, we can do things slowly and deliberately and with intention, and that is a mindful way of being. But again, it's not about doing things slowly. And it also doesn't require a serious time commitment. So sometimes when people think mindfulness, they think, oh my gosh, I need to be sitting in meditation for half an hour twice a day. Okay, no, not the case. You can do it on the fly, just like I did when I was in bed going, okay, what am I going to do to manage my mind right now? So that's just to clear up a few misconceptions. So the way we're going to be looking at mindfulness in this webinar today is through these three lenses. So we're looking at it through the lens of psychology, neuroscience, and contemplative practices. So the origins of mindfulness, they do come from the ancient wisdom traditions, and they include many what we would call contemplative practices like meditation. Some of you guys might know of centering prayer or different forms of prayer, compassion and kindness. So really, historically, many of these practices we have been looking at and doing for many years. But our current understanding of mindfulness merges these practices with the latest Western psychology and neuroscience discoveries. So I think this is fascinating. We have learned more in the last 20 years about the human brain than we have known in all of human history. And while neuroscientists will still say they don't know a lot about the brain, they have learned a lot more than they used to know. And so what they have been learning is now that they can test some of these mindfulness practices in fMRI machines, and they can start seeing data and having research to show the practices are having these positive results, they now know that mindfulness practices can change the brain structure and function in really meaningful and desirable ways. So that's one of the reasons many people are starting to hear mindfulness becoming more talked about these days, and why corporations are even bringing it into their companies for their employees, is because there's now this scientific data that is supporting these practices for people to manage their stress and their focus and their well-being. And additionally, mental health professionals like psychotherapists are using these practices because they're really finding that it's enhancing a lot of their other current practices in psychotherapy. Okay, so this picture, the mind and the heart swinging together. We just love this image because mindfulness practices are often associated with training our minds. However, engaging our hearts is equally important. It's an equally important component of mindfulness that sometimes doesn't get talked about enough. So we just really want to make sure we emphasize this. When we practice, when we use practices that engage the heart, like compassion and self-compassion and empathy and kindness, when those practices are combined with a calmer, clearer mind, we can realize the deeper experiences of our practice. So John Kabat-Zinn, who's one of the kind of forefathers of mindfulness in our country, the USA, he was one of the people who brought it first into hospitals to study how mindfulness can help people with their pain and reduce stress within people going through treatments. But this is his quote, which we love. So if you don't somehow hear the word heartfulness as you are reading or hearing mindfulness, you are not fully grasping the spirit, the meaning, or the invitation of mindfulness as a way of living. And then we wanted to show you, this is the Chinese character for the word mindfulness. And even this character, it's just such a perfect representation of this heart and mind coming together. So the top of this character, it's the shelter part. It represents now or presence. And the bottom part here, I don't know if you can see my mouse, this is the character for mind and heart. So this character is the literal translation means bringing the mind and the heart into the present. Okay, so that is a little bit about mindfulness, what it is, some misconceptions we have. And now we just want to jump into our first mindfulness practice so you guys can really start to feel what it's like to begin to practice mindfulness. So since we can't see any of you guys, you don't have to be embarrassed, but we're going to do a quick little meditation. So if you are willing to join, just take a second to kind of just sit up in a nice little dignified position, not too stiff, not too tight, just kind of sit up straight. And if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. And why don't you just take one deep breath in and exhale. And those exhales, when we have this kind of breathing, we can just imagine stress just kind of sliding off our shoulders. So one more inhale, inhale. Exhale, feeling any stress or worry or tension just sliding off the shoulders. And now that your eyes are closed, I want you guys to bring to mind someone that you love or care about. It can be a person or an animal, or it can even be a place or a thing that you love, but just bring that person or animal or place to your mind. Make it a clear image, and then sink it down into your heart. Just kind of drop it right down so you can feel this love that you have, and kind of just magnifying it, just really feel into it. And now if you want, you can even imagine that you are sending this person or animal or place or thing love. Just really send it a dose of love, wishing it to be well and happy and joyful even. And when you're ready now, you can open your eyes, and you have just completed your first mindfulness practice of this webinar. So I hope that just even feeling that and getting that sense of just dropping in, even for a moment, into that place of the heart, that we can just become more present and really have the ability to shift our physiology, shift our nervous system into a calmer state. Okay, so that's a little intro to mindfulness. Now, why do we even need mindfulness? What's the point? So we talked a little bit about this in the beginning with the definition, just that mindfulness practices are designed to help us alleviate stress and anxiety and overall just give us a greater sense of well-being. But really, we're going to take it back one step further. Why do we even have all this stress and anxiety? Why is this even a thing that we need to correct? Well, as it turns out, Mother Nature only cares about passing along genes by any means necessary. She really doesn't care if we happen to suffer along the way. So our brains evolved for survival rather than happiness. And some of the very things that helped us survive and pass along our genes have made us unhappy. So our species survived by being very good at recognizing potential threats to our survival. The better we got at scanning the environment for things that could harm us, the higher our chances were of continuing to stay alive. So if you can imagine our long time ago ancestors walking the plains of the savannas, we're walking around and we think, is that a rock or are those lions? We can't tell. Well, if you made that mistake and it turned out to be lions, there's a really good chance you wouldn't have survived and passed along your genes. So it was really important for us to be aware of how this was happening in real time and stay alert for that. So the problem with this is that while scanning for danger kept us alive, it also optimized our brains to be constantly on alert for possible threats. So our brain is highly optimized and extremely efficient at looking for possible threats, right? So these started out as physical threats to our survival, but then that circuitry became so automatic and so fast and still is. But then it also merged into social threats, anything that might make us go into a state of that we're not going to survive. Those kind of two patterns of the brain intertwined. And so now sometimes we see social threats in the same way we once saw physical threats. So just having this understanding that this is happening, going on in our minds, we're great at seeing things that are threatening to us. But the problem with it is it has created this pattern, and that pattern often creates unhappiness in us. So this has led scientists to believe that our brains have a built-in negativity bias. So newspapers I'm sure most of you guys know this. They know, if you've ever heard that sentence, that expression, if it bleeds, it leads, right? So this is like, newspapers know this about our minds. They might not know it from a neuroscience point of view, but they know that we as humans, we grab on to headlines that make us feel like danger is coming, right? So that we can be prepared for when something has happened. We want to know what's happening in our environment so that we can keep ourselves safe. And advertisers do the same thing. They're usually kind of pressuring us in ways that kind of trigger some type of fear so that we will respond. Not always, but oftentimes, if you start paying attention, you'll start noticing that. They're playing into our negativity bias. So if you think of this quote, it's a great visual just to understand this concept. We've got a brain that's like Velcro for the bad and Teflon for the good. So when you just think about that, our brain is highly optimized to see and hold on to these negative experiences. Why? Because in our survival mechanism, we thought, okay, that in the past was a threat to us. We're going to make sure never to do that again. And in the future, we need to make sure we're never going to go there again either. So it's always looking to past and future and how to keep us safe. So just keep that in your mind, the idea that our brain is optimized like Teflon for the good, things just kind of slide off, but Velcro for the bad, and just to be aware of that. So what does this look like in today's world, in our real lives? What are some examples of how our brain is like Velcro for the bad things? So I just want you guys to take a moment and just kind of reflect back in the last, say, 24, 48 hours, and just start thinking about anything that has caused you just a little bit of stress and anxiety. What might it be? Was it something like, what was something happening in the news? I love this image because it's a woman opening her laptop, and even just something as simple as opening your laptop can create a flood of negative thinking. You know, maybe it's the news, maybe it's some emails that were not great for you to read, and you know, any type of thing on the internet can cause us to kind of get hijacked into some emotional negative state. Maybe we're fearing our finances right now, not knowing what the future holds because everything is so destabilized with COVID. Maybe we replay a conversation that we had with someone that went really badly, and we kind of ruminate thinking about, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said it that way, right? These are kind of things that might keep us up at night. Maybe we feel guilty about the frustration that we might feel from homeschooling our kids, right? Maybe Jennifer and I have one client that's always talking about, oh, I'm feeling so guilty. My kid's always on the iPad. I just feel such like a terrible parent. So just think about, what is it for you right now in real time that might be creating and bringing up some of these stressful thoughts? Probably came up with a few. Now, what we want you to do is flip that around and think about, what are some positive things that have happened in the last 24, 48 hours for you? There's probably been hundreds of things that have happened that are just, they weren't really bad. Actually, tons of good things, right? Just having fresh, clean water to drink, right? There's all kinds of good things that are happening to us all the time. But because our brain isn't optimized to remember them, like Teflon, they often just kind of slide away and we don't really put much attention on them. And we do tend to hold on to some of those negative things. So this is a great quote we love by Robert Wright. He actually is a neurophysiologist who, a evolutionary biologist. And he was very skeptical about mindfulness practices until he started practicing them. And then he wrote a book about it. And he said, I think of mindfulness as a rebellion against a natural selection. It gives us the ability to take a very close look at the way the machinery works and choose which feelings we want to follow and which we don't. So in mindfulness terms, we like to think of this as, this is the space in between stimulus and response. So you have something that stimulates you, maybe it's some news headline or some situation you're thinking about, and then you have the response to that. And in between, if you just imagine this bubble, is where you get this opportunity to become aware of what you want to do and take a pause and decide how you want to respond, instead of just automatically acting without thinking. And oftentimes in that space, it really can determine the quality of our lives. So in the case that I talked about earlier, while I was lying in bed thinking my anxiety thoughts, what I chose to do in my purposeful pause moment in that bubble in between was I used some mindfulness practices to tame my mind. And therefore my response was to be able to fall asleep. So just kind of keeping that in mind, that mindfulness practices are designed to help us take that purposeful pause. Okay, so what is mindfulness? Why do we need them? And now we're going to talk about a few mindfulness practices. Okay, so mindfulness practices can basically be broken down into two main categories, formal and informal. So our formal practices, let me go back. Our formal practices include an intentional commitment of time, and they invite us to focus with awareness. Okay, so formal practices, just like it sounds, it's more of a formal practice, right? So formal practices include things like a sitting meditation. So you decided ahead of time, you're going to take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is for you, and you're going to do a sitting meditation, or maybe even a walking meditation. And for any of you guys that haven't done a walking meditation, I highly recommend it. It's amazing. You can look it up on the internet to find different techniques for walking meditation. But really, this is just an intention to go do a meditation practice, really, which might be walking for you, or even eating, another fantastic meditation that we would recommend. And this is another practice, and just kind of think about what you're going to eat next. In fact, right after this webinar, the next thing you eat, imagine you're an alien and you've never seen food before, and you've never even seen a sandwich or a grape or a chip or whatever you're going to eat, and just notice, what's it like to crunch on it? What's the smell? What's the flavor? You have heightened awareness and you're highly present with your eating. So anyway, formal practice would be doing that in advance and planning. I'm going to have a mindful lunch, right? A guided meditation. I'm sure many of you guys have done, or maybe some of you have done guided meditations. And again, this is when you actually decide ahead of time to take some time to do this. Body scanning, checking in with the whole body. That's another formal practice. Yoga, that might be another form of practice. So these are examples of practices that we would put in the category of I'm making time for them, and they're going to take some time. Now, informal mindfulness practices allow us to be aware of present experience during everyday activities. And this is the kind where Jennifer and I could say we do 100 a day of these, right? So these are what informal practices might look like. So this is just when you're walking around every day and you just happen to notice beauty in nature, right? You just get kind of taken out of your autopilot of going through and thinking about your day, and all of a sudden you just zero in for one moment and think, oh my goodness, look at the trees, look at that flower, the air smells so fresh and clean, right? So that's just an informal practice. Having compassion and self-compassion, right? So just taking a moment, right in the moment, like maybe you're going to say something negative to yourself or someone, and then all of a sudden you turn it around in real time. That's a great practice, really important. Being aware of your parenting. Are you parenting the way you want to parent? All of a sudden you might catch yourself in the middle of any activity with your child and think, oh my gosh, maybe I could have had more patience, or maybe this is how I'm going to do this. I'm going to show this example, or even not berating yourself for not doing a great job. These are great ways that we can bring mindfulness practice in. As we talked about earlier, naming entertainment. So just becoming aware of our thought patterns, naming anxiety, frustration, fear, right? Just having that ability to kind of see it from a different perspective. And Jennifer's going to talk a lot more about that later, just being able to witness what's going on. Choosing to not get triggered during a disagreement, right? Not very easy. Have any of you guys ever done this? Because if you have, it's like a superpower. Some of you might be great at this, otherwise not so much. But just in the middle, you can kind of decide to take a different road. That's a great example of an informal mindfulness practice. And listening to another person fully without planning what to say next. Okay, that's definitely one I have to work on all the time, because I'm always thinking about what I'm going to say next. So when I'm really practicing, I intentionally decide to stay focused and not even think about my response. So this is another example. And there are so many more practices, right? There's so many formal and informal practices, but this is just to give you a sampler of some of them. So let's see. Oops, sorry. We want you once again now to do an exercise. So the first step in mindfulness practice, like we talked about, is awareness. So we're going to do a quick 1-minute meditation just to increase awareness. So once again, if you can go ahead and sit up straight Take a deep breath, nice dignified position, and close your eyes. And with your eyes closed, I want you to pay attention to every single sensation you can. So I want you to pay attention to what you hear. What are you hearing right now? What do you smell? Even what do you taste? Even though you might not have anything in your mouth right now, what does it taste like? What do you feel with your sense of touch? What are your legs on the touching? What are your hands? What are your arms touching? Is your back touching? And what do you feel inside? What are you feeling? What are your thoughts? What's running through your mind? And when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes. I so wish we could hear what you guys might have noticed. I so wish we could have everybody list out all the different things that they noticed. But this is just such a great exercise that we love to practice, because you can do this again. Oftentimes when you're emotionally hijacked in any way, you could just do this very quickly, tune in to everything I'm noticing. And one of the interesting things that comes up for a lot of people is sound, right? So they start hearing the sound of the fan or the air conditioner, things that our brain normally tunes out. But it's great to kind of focus on all these sounds. We might hear a bird chirping, maybe someone doing some construction work in the background. So just being aware of our thoughts, our sensations, this is one of the very fundamental practices of mindfulness. So mindfulness practices get stronger with practice. Just to be clear, just learning about mindfulness practices and having a little webinar or reading a book, these are not what sort of builds that muscle of mindfulness. And while the brain isn't a muscle, the nervous system isn't a muscle, it is kind of like a muscle in that the more we use it, the stronger it gets. So like mastering any skill, it takes practice. Like learning an instrument, it's a dose-related activity. A little bit of mindfulness practice gives us a little bit of mindfulness, and a lot helps us develop a lot more mindfulness. So we're going to show you a quick video right now that goes through and kind of gives you a bigger understanding of what's actually happening in the brain and in the nervous system when we practice mindfulness. I'm hoping you guys can all hear this, but here we go. Neuroplasticity.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-traveled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep traveling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
Okay, so I'm passing it over to Jen now, and I'm going to be managing the slides, so please forgive if there's any glitches, but here we go. Oh, and Jen, it looks like you're on mute right now. Did you know that? Do I unmute you?
Okay, how's this?
There we go. Got it.
Good? Okay. Okay, that video, I love it. It personally makes me feel like nothing I've done is going to last forever if I've ruined myself or my children. That any bad habits, I have the ability to change and I can improve things. So that always gave me such a sense of peace. I loved that video. I hope you did too. Before we move on, I'd like us all to take just one big, deep, mindful breath, almost like a sigh. So together, let's take a big deep breath in and then just release it out. So that in itself was a mindfulness practice, a deep belly breath, a deep breath in and an even longer exhale out. Something as simple as just taking a breath can help us reset to really calm the nervous system, especially when we start to feel that stress and anxiety coming on. So when Lynn and I talk about doing mindfulness practices throughout our day, sometimes it's as simple as just taking a little breath. And if you think about a sigh, particularly a sigh, these breaths happen automatically. It's that sigh after finishing a big project or needing to catch your breath when you're in a heightened conversation. If we think of what a sigh represents, we can almost relate that to what we gain from the exercises of mindfulness. It's like we drop to another level. We get to release. We get to relieve that stress and we just get to let it go. Breathing is the most powerful way to relax our system. And we do it all the time. But if we apply intention and mindfulness to it, it can really just calm us down in those heightened moments when we just need to relax. So that is the deep breath. Moving on to another mindfulness practice, I want us to talk about the ability to watch our thoughts. So this next slide, there's a bubble here. Don't believe everything you think. Thoughts are just that. They're thoughts. In 2005, the National Science Foundation published an article citing that the average person has about 60,000 thoughts per day. 60,000 thoughts per day. And of those thousands of thoughts, 80% of them were negative. So when our scientists have discovered that we were predispositioned to always be on alert for threats, and that has created us with this negativity bias, 80% of our thoughts are negative. So another nice statistic here is of those 60,000 thoughts, 95% of them were exactly the same repetitive thoughts as the day before. So if I have any type A personalities with us right now, I want you to consider how counterproductive that is. That our minds are replaying 95% of our 60,000 thoughts day after day. It's not very productive. And that's happening to us automatically. So I hope that by sharing this research with you, it helps you to see that one of the tendencies of the mind is to focus on the negative and to replay and play that same song over and over again. So our mental habits can be both useful and destructive. That's what we've learned. Our minds go into this mental loop, right? And if you take a look at her little thought bubble there, our mind can take over seconds after we've completed something. Oh no, was that email too much? Did I sound too harsh? What will this person think? It's kind of fascinating when you start to pay attention to the way the mind works. It has its own rhythm, it has its own patterns, it has its own tendencies, it's self-conscious. And until we learn to stop and notice our thoughts and to catch ourselves in these loops, we are not aware of the many spontaneous things that are happening. So to be mindful is truly an art. It takes effort, practice, skill. It takes work. We really do need to practice this over and over again to become more aware of the thoughts going through our mind. And it's true, we gain a lot of positive from our thoughts, but when we think about that 80% of those thoughts being negative, we need to realize that those thoughts can also cause us harm. And just like Lynn said earlier, it's like Velcro, right? It's like Velcro for the mind. So by gaining more awareness, we can see patterns of thinking that have been developed over our lifetime, and we can see the patterns that have undermined our mental health. Our goal is to become so comfortable with seeing our thoughts that when we start to fall into that loop, our awareness can stop us and give us a chance to evaluate the thought as healthy or helpful or unhealthy. And by just taking that really purposeful pause, it allows us a chance to change. So I want us to take a look at some of these patterns. Lynn brought up the reference of falling asleep at night, laying in bed. I personally know that late at night, for whatever reason, my mind goes to the worst, most negative thoughts possible. And that loop puts me in that really dark space, right? So it is one of the beautiful areas to just practice mindfulness. So those thoughts, many of those thoughts while we're laying there, they aren't necessarily relevant to the situations we find ourselves in. So what does that mean? That means that they're not really related to the present moment. We are overthinking either the past, the future, or we're creating these layers of stories based on something we've seen before, heard before, or previously experienced. And as a mom, this is something I think about all the time as to what I'm letting my children watch, what movies I'm letting them see, what songs I'm letting them listen to. All of that's getting into that subconscious mind. And those are the layers of stories we start to bring out when we're not paying attention to our thoughts. They're in there. So I want us to take a moment and think back to a night when you couldn't fall asleep. It could have been last night or maybe just a moment over the week. What was replaying in your mind? So truly try right now and just think of that a thought, if you can recall a topic that kept you from falling asleep. Maybe a third of us were stuck on something that had already passed. It was gone, but we were becoming the critic of whatever something was that we had done or hadn't done. Maybe we're saying in our minds, like, I'm such a dork for saying that. Why did I say that? How embarrassing, right? I'm sure a lot of us have had those thoughts. Maybe another third of us were stressing about something in the future. Like, oh my gosh, these last few months have been so trying on me. I don't know what's going to be in the future. I don't know what July is going to bring. I don't know what August is going to look like. I don't know if my kids are going to be able to go back to school. Am I just going to continually ruin them by having them sitting on the couch with the iPad? We might be worrying about things in the future that we just don't have any control over, right? And then that last third, we're most likely making up assumptions of a situation based on a past experience, or we are naturally conditioned to think the worst. So maybe that's a thought like, I always get sick. What if I'm around others now that everything is opening back up and I'm the one to get sick with this virus? And that fear, the way that it hijacks our body, it takes over. And that's the loop we fall into. So we got to become really aware of this, right? We need to recognize that our perceptions can create totally distorted views of a circumstance. Instead of being in that present moment, we get really wrapped up in the future or the past or all of these other layers of thought, telling stories around all of these thoughts that we have. And what we're doing is we're really applying our perception, and we're creating this real distorted view of the truth. So what we need to do is we need to stay neutral, not think of our thoughts in whether or not they're good or bad, but we just need to look at them as to what is the truth here. So for example, let's say that you open up your email and you're just flooded with your inbox. Immediately you think, I have way too much work. I'm never going to get through all this. So it's where your mind goes. It's stressed already. So is it true that you have too much work? Are you estimating how long something is going to take you based on how long it took you last time? Or are you just feeling so overwhelmed that everything just feels like too much? What if we were to shift that perception, right? What if we approach the same situation with a different attitude? Okay, we open our email. This feels like a lot, but I'm going to see what I can do. I'm just going to tackle it with the few hours that I have right now. I'm going to see how far I get. Our thoughts send signals that create emotion. So the first thought that we had, that it was too much, that you were never going to get through it, that's an overwhelming thought, and it's stressful before we've even begun. The second thought which is, okay, this feels like a lot, but I'm just going to dive in and I'm going to tackle what I can do. That thought is almost more exciting. It's almost ambitious, right? It creates a little bit of competitive fun in us. So the truth is, we actually get to choose how we want to feel. Our voices, the voices in our head, they're very often thoughts that are our worst enemy, right? We think of things and we think, oh my gosh, we're doing it wrong again. We're stupid. Why would we choose to do that? These perceptions create totally distorted views of any circumstance. And we tell our stories like we're not good enough, or there's not enough time, or there's not enough money. Oftentimes the stories we start with is there's not enough time, not enough money, not enough space, not enough. And we start to automatically get defensive, or we feel protective, and we start being judgmental of others. Our minds can do two things. They can become very judgmental of ourselves, and we can start to feel less than, or we can start to feel better than others. And both views are destructive. But there's hope, and that's why we're here with you today. We want you to know that we really can free ourselves from these thoughts by just basically becoming aware of them. It's like watching a movie and just eating the popcorn, right? Just like that little image there. Wow, that's a really interesting thought in there. So if we start by noticing these voices in our heads as often as we can pick up on both the positive and the negative. We can stop looping in the heads and adding stress by just hearing it over and over again. Thoughts like, I'll never have enough money. I'm not smart enough. My parents didn't love me. People are stupid. I've heard that one a lot. And like we shared earlier, there are informal and formal ways of becoming more aware. So those more formal ways, like journaling or meditating or finding time to really reflect on your day, or informal, like just taking a moment to pause and to look at just what happened, or something as simple as bringing breath to the mind, or slowing down the multitasking that you're doing and just taking a step to just stop and become more of that objective observer. When we let thoughts like pass, we can start to recognize those bad habits and we can stop them. But we have to bring intention to these thoughts, and we have to see what is happening inside so that we can start to change. So listening to the voices without identifying them as good or bad, and just staying neutral, we can become that silent observer. So the more we practice this non-judgmental awareness of our thoughts, the more they lose power. They lose their charge, and the more in power we become. So they lose power because we are no longer energizing those thoughts by identifying with them, and we aren't layering on our emotions, but we are staying neutral, and we're just observing. We're just observing, and it's absolutely magical. It almost becomes the end to that involuntary and compulsive thinking, and we can change that ruminating behavior. We can stop the loss of sleep, and we can stop the fear of our future, and we can let go of the stress from the past. And it's about emotionally deciding how we want to perceive a situation. And the more neutral we can be, the more objectively we can read that situation. You might even find this practice fun and begin to find some lightheartedness and humor in what it is you're observing. So we're going to do one last practice. I want you to bring to mind a thought that you've had many times. And if it helps, I'd like you to close your eyes. Start with a big deep breath and just release it out, and bring to mind a thought. Maybe it's a pattern of something that comes over and over again for you, something you've had many times that has disturbed your peace in some way. It could be a worry about the future, or something you did or something you didn't do. It could feel big, or maybe it can be small. But I want you to notice that you're having this thought. You might even say to yourself, there it is again. Hello, worrisome thought. Or, wow, this is interesting. I keep having this thought. I want you to see whatever that thought is as if it's written in the sky, as if a skywriter has written it out there. And I want you to allow yourself to feel separated from it as much as you can, and to watch it from a distance. And now watch as the sentence begins to break up and just drift across the sky, while you remain peaceful and calm on the ground. So take in a deep breath, and with every exhale, just watch that thought drift further and further away. Now go ahead and open your eyes. So there are many ways to practice becoming the silent observer of our thoughts. But the key is to become aware of them without judgment. It's about allowing them to just be and to let them float away as you remain in a peaceful state. And if that feels impossible, just start with your breath. Your breath is the easiest way to find peace. As stress and anxiety starts to come on, just start with your breath. So we've learned a lot about mindfulness, what it is, why we need it, and maybe we've learned a couple of new practices, but we really have only just scratched the surface. So we encourage you to keep learning, to begin practicing, and to notice how much control you really can have in lowering your own stress and anxiety. So let's review a few points from today. The first one is that mindfulness equals non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. So just become mindful of whatever's going on in that present moment. Remember that mindfulness equals heartfulness. That if we want to really start to feel good and take on more sense of happiness, we're bringing our mindfulness into tune with our heart. The next one is that we can have compassion for ourselves and others, knowing that our brains did not evolve for happiness, but survival. Don't judge yourself. This is natural. This is what is happening inside our brains. You are not good or bad, but you do have thoughts that are negative. And so let's just become more mindful of them and aware of them, and let's notice them and start to learn to just let them pass. Don't judge yourself for them. And the last thought we want you to, or the last takeaway we want you to have, is that mindfulness is a dose-related activity. The more practice equals the more mindfulness. It takes practice. Nothing good comes easy. It's not a pill. You've got to stick with it, and you got to keep practicing it. And there's a lot of things you can do throughout your day in quick little seconds to just bring this mindfulness to the present. So data has shown an amazing variety of neurological and physiological, psychological benefits to mindfulness, physiological too. Reduced stress and anxiety, improved memory. So as some of us getting older start to think like we're losing our memory, guess what? It doesn't have to be that way. We can pull it back. Improved ability to focus. Improved immune function. We can physically take better care of our bodies by being more mindful. Improved clarity and creativity, and an improved sense of happiness. It's wonderful. We really can just start to feel better by becoming more mindful. So we're going to wrap this practice up with one last meditation. It's called the Just Like Me meditation. And just to share a little bit about my personal life, I have a 13-year-old son now, but at the time that I started practicing this meditation with him, he was 12. And by teaching him how to look at others and relate them really to who he was, he became more compassionate for others. And so I want to practice this with you. And I hope that you too can gain that compassion for others by just practicing something as simple as a meditation like this. So Lynn, would you like to walk us through it?
Sorry. Okay, here I am. So want you to bring to mind, there's many ways we can do this meditation, but we're going to start with someone, bring to mind someone like we did in the another exercise, where someone that you really care about. Can you hear me? I'm unmuted, right? Okay. So bring to mind someone that you care about in your life. Think about that person, bring them down into your heart. You can close your eyes. And I'm going to just go ahead and give you the prompts for this meditation. But I want you to silently say this to yourself as I'm saying this to you. So as you're thinking about this person, this just like me practice, silently say to yourself, this person has a body and a mind just like me. This person has feelings and emotions and thoughts just like me. This person has at some point in their life been sad, disappointed, angry, hurt, or confused, just like me. This person has in their life experienced physical and emotional pain and suffering, just like me. This person wishes to be free of pain and suffering, just like me. This person wishes to be healthy and loved and to have fulfilling relationships, just like me. This person wishes to be happy, just like me. And when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes and just reflect. This meditation, it reminds us of how similar other people really are to us. And it helps us increase our empathy, like Jennifer was saying happened with her son. And it's a great practice to start with someone you love and care about, but you can also stretch yourself over time to bring to mind some people that you might have challenges with. Start small. Don't jump into the hardest person in your life, but you may begin to think of people that are either neutral or maybe just even kind of give you a little rub. And the more you think about this person, the more you can engage the heart and understand that connection that you have. So Jennifer and I would just want to thank you so much, and Morris and Garitano for having us today. We hope you guys learned something new about mindfulness. And even though we only had 40 minutes together, we hope you gleaned something that you can really is an hour, but 40 minutes for us, really bring into your life. This is normally an 8-hour training that we have. So we're just really crunching it down into kind of its essential ingredients. And we hope you're able to get some takeaways. For more information on this, we have created a PDF of exercises that Morris and Garitano said that they would be able to send along to you. So if you're interested in that, you can have that. And they're also recording the presentation. So if you would like to stay connected with us for opportunities to keep learning this, you can sign up for our newsletter at the site below. And I don't think we have too much time for questions right now, maybe one or two if anybody has any, but we would welcome anything that you guys might have.
I don't see that we have any questions in our chat box or Q&A box right now. Okay. But if one does pop in there, you've still got a second here. Otherwise, just wanted to say thank you so much to all of you for being here with us today. And thank you so much to Lynn and Jennifer to helping us be more mindful and encourage the heart. And as a reminder, we will be sending this recording and posting it on our COVID-19 resource page, where you can also find information dedicated to return to work resources and guidelines. We'll continue to bring you webinars on topics that can help protect your business, operations, your employees. So keep an eye out for those emails. Thank you and have a great day.